The galaxy cast them out, but humanity offered refuge. Without hesitation, the Galactic Council chambers had never witnessed such unanimous hatred. Representatives from over 300 species sat in their crystalline pods, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of disgust and fear. At the center of the vast amphitheater, a single containment field held the subject of their collective fury. Ambassador Cathera of the Vorthak Collective stood at the speaking platform, her 4 arms gesturing dramatically as her translated words echoed through the chamber. The Zerathi are a plague upon our galaxy. Their very existence threatens the natural order that has maintained peace for millennia. Inside the containment field, Elder Zephyrim remained motionless. The Zerathi's crystalline body caught the chamber's light, refracting it into beautiful patterns that danced across the walls. To an untrained eye, the being appeared almost angelic, its translucent form seeming to pulse with inner light. But every representative in the chamber knew the terrible truth. The Zerathi could manipulate reality itself. Council Speaker Thymon, an ancient being whose species had founded the Galactic Council eons ago, raised his massive form from the central dais. His voice, carried by telepathic amplifiers, reached every mind in the chamber. Elder Zephyrim of the Zerathi Collective, you stand accused of crimes against the natural laws of existence. How do you answer? Zephyrim's response came not in words, but in a gentle pulse of light that somehow conveyed meaning to every species present, regardless of their communication method. We have harmed no one. We seek only to exist in peace. A roar of outrage erupted from the assembly. The Corvin representative, a massive insectoid creature, clicked his mandibles rapidly. Peace! Your people turned an entire star system into a paradise garden overnight. You changed the fundamental nature of matter itself. The Deltari homeworld, added another voice from the crowd. You saved it from destruction by rewriting the laws of physics in that sector. Such power is an abomination. Zephyrim's light dimmed slightly. We helped them. Their son was dying. We gave it new life. That is precisely the problem, Thymon rumbled. No species should possess such power. The Zerathi represent a threat to the natural order of the universe. Your ability to manipulate reality at the quantum level makes you too dangerous to exist among civilized species. The Elder's form seemed to droop. We have never used our gifts for conquest or destruction. We heal worlds, nurture life, bring beauty to barren places. And that, hissed the Serpentine delegate, is what makes you most dangerous. Your benevolence is more terrifying than any weapon, because it proves your power has no limits. Ambassador Cathara stepped forward again. The proposal before the council is simple. The Zerathi must be relocated beyond our borders, to the empty quarter of the galaxy, where their reality-altering abilities cannot affect civilized space. The empty quarter. Zephyrim had heard of it, a vast region where dying stars and cosmic anomalies created an environment hostile to most forms of life. It was essentially a death sentence, though the council would never admit it. But we number barely 10,000, Zephyrim protested. We are no threat to your trillions. 10,000 beings who can reshape reality with a thought, Thymon replied. Tell me, Elder, what happens when your people grow frustrated with exile? What happens when one of your kind decides that the galaxy would be better under Zerathi guidance? We cannot take that risk. The vote was called. 317 species voted for exile. 0 voted against. The Zerathi would be given 1 standard month to gather their people and depart for the empty quarter. As the containment field dissolved and Zephyrim was escorted away, none of the council representatives felt guilt. They felt only relief that they had acted before the Zerathi became a true threat. 3 weeks later, the Zerathi had gathered at the edge of council space. Their small fleet of bioships floated near the invisible border that separated the civilized galaxy from the empty quarter. Each ship was a work of art, grown rather than built, their hulls pulsing gently with life. Zephyrim stood in the observation chamber of the lead vessel, watching the last of their people arrive. Children played in the corridors behind him, their laughter creating small ripples in reality that made flowers bloom from the walls. They didn't understand that they were being cast out because of gifts they couldn't control. "Elder," came a voice behind him. He turned to see Ythara, one of their youngest adults, her crystalline form barely past its first transformation. "The council ships are maintaining their distance, but they're watching us. They want to make sure we actually leave." "Of course they do," Zephyrim replied. "To them, we represent chaos incarnate." "But we've never hurt anyone," Ythara said, confusion coloring her light. "We've only helped." "That's what frightens them most, child. They understand destruction. It follows rules, has limits. But creation, healing, making the impossible possible, that threatens their understanding of how the universe should work." As they prepared to cross into the empty quarter, long-range sensors detected something unexpected. A small fleet of ships approached from deeper in council space, but these weren't council vessels. The ship designs were primitive by galactic standards: metal hulls instead of grown biomatter, fusion drives instead of reality-folding engines. Unknown vessels. "This is the Zerathi convoy," Zephyrim transmitted on common frequencies. "We are departing council space as ordered. Please maintain distance." The response came in a language none of the Zerathi had heard before, but their universal translators quickly adapted. "Zerathi convoy, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the human vessel Endeavor. We're here to help." "Humans?" Ythara whispered. "I thought they were still confined to their home system." Zephyrim was equally puzzled. Humanity had been granted basic council membership only recently and were considered a minor species of little importance. "Captain Chen, we appreciate your concern, but we must depart as the council has ordered." "Yeah, we heard about that," came the casual reply. "Complete political horseshit if you ask me. Look, we've got food, medical supplies, and if you're interested, we'd like to offer you sanctuary." The elder's form flickered with surprise. "Sanctuary? Captain, you do understand what we are, don't you? The council fears us because we can manipulate reality itself." "So I heard. Sounds pretty useful, actually. We humans have a saying, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. You can heal dying worlds? We've got several that could use the help." This was unprecedented. Zephyrim quickly conferred with the other elders. None of them had expected this development. "Captain Chen, while we appreciate your offer, associating with us could bring the council's displeasure upon your species." Sarah's laugh crackled through the comm system. "Let me tell you something about humans, Elder. We've got a real problem with authority figures who pick on people for being different. Besides, from what I've read about your people, you're exactly the kind of neighbors we'd want. But the council can kiss our collective ass. We're not abandoning people who need help just because some political blowhards are scared of change." Zephyrim felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. "Captain, are you certain about this? Once you offer us sanctuary, there may be no going back." "Elder, my grandmother always said that you're judged not by how you treat the powerful, but by how you treat those who have nowhere else to turn. The Zerathi have nowhere else to turn, so here we are." As the small human fleet moved to escort the Zerathi ships, Zephyrim marveled at this unexpected turn. Humanity was barely a century into space travel, had no reality-shaping powers, and possessed technology that most council species would consider quaint. Yet they were willing to risk everything to help complete strangers. "Elder," Ythara said softly, "these humans, they're not afraid of us." "No, child, they're not. And perhaps that's what makes them the most remarkable species in the galaxy." The journey to human space took 2 weeks. During that time, delegations from both species met regularly. The humans were fascinated by Zarathi abilities, but in a way that was completely different from the Council's fearful reaction. They asked questions about practical applications. Could the Zarathi help terraform dead worlds, heal damaged ecosystems, provide new sources of energy? Dr. Marcus Webb, the expedition's lead scientist, spent hours with the Zarathi children, watching in wonder as they unconsciously reshaped small objects around them. "It's incredible," he told Zephyrim. "They're not just manipulating matter. They're convincing it to become something else entirely." "And that doesn't frighten you?" the elder asked. "Frighten me? It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Do you know what we could accomplish working together?" The enthusiasm was infectious. For the first time since the Council's decree, the Zarathi began to feel something other than despair. When they finally reached the human colonial territory, Zephyrim was surprised to find a significant fleet waiting for them. Not warships, but colony vessels, scientific expeditions, and cargo haulers. "Captain Chen," he asked, "what is all this?" Sarah's voice was warm with excitement. "Well, Elder, we figured if we're going to do this, we might as well do it right. We've got 3 systems picked out for your people, good stars, suitable planets, plenty of room to grow. The Colonial Authority has already approved emergency settlement rights. But the expense, the resources, are being covered by volunteer donations from across human space. Turns out when people heard about what happened to your people, they wanted to help. We've got enough supplies to establish 3 separate colonies, plus the infrastructure to get them self-sufficient within a year." Zephyrim's form pulsed with emotion he couldn't contain. "Captain, I don't understand. Why would your people do this for strangers?" "Because that's what decent people do," she replied simply. "Besides, we humans have a long history of being cast out and looking for new homes. Seems fitting that we'd offer the same chance to others." As the combined fleet headed toward the first of the proposed colony worlds, Zephyrim reflected on the strange turn their fate had taken. The Council, with all their ancient wisdom and cosmic perspective, had seen only danger in the Zarathi. But these young, primitive humans had seen potential. Perhaps, he thought, wisdom wasn't about understanding the universe as it was, but about imagining what it could become. The first colony world was perfect. A young planet with a stable star, rich soil, and clear blue skies that reminded the Zarathi of their lost homeworld. As their ships entered orbit, something remarkable happened. The planet itself seemed to respond to their presence, the colors growing more vivid, the very air seeming to thrum with new life. "Will you look at that?" Captain Chen breathed over the comm. "It's like the planet's welcoming you home." And for the first time since their exile began, Zephyrim allowed himself to believe that perhaps this wasn't an ending after all. Perhaps it was a beginning. The galaxy cast them out, but humanity offered refuge without hesitation. 6 months after the Zarathi settlement, the planet New Haven had transformed beyond recognition. What had once been a barren world with basic atmosphere and sparse vegetation now bloomed with impossible beauty. Crystalline trees reached toward purple skies, their branches singing in harmonies that could heal both body and spirit. Rivers flowed uphill when gravity forgot its rules near Zarathi children, and flowers bloomed in geometric patterns that defied natural law. Dr. Marcus Webb stood on a hill overlooking the main settlement, his tablet recording readings that would have made Council scientists weep. The planet's ecosystem wasn't just thriving, it was evolving in real time, adapting and improving with each passing day as the Zarathi unconsciously reshaped reality around them. "Still having trouble believing it's real?" came a familiar voice behind him. Marcus turned to see Captain Chen approaching, now serving as the human liaison to the Zarathi colonies. In the months since the settlement, she'd become something of a folk hero back in human space, though she seemed uncomfortable with the attention. "Every day," Marcus admitted. The soil composition alone. They've managed to create a substrate that's perfectly suited for both human and Zarathi agriculture. Food grown here has nutritional values that exceed anything we've developed in our best hydroponic labs. And they do it all just by existing here, Sarah mused. No technology, no complex engineering. They just want the world to be better, and it becomes better. A gentle chime in the air announced the arrival of Elder Zephyrim. The Zarathi leader had grown brighter in the months since their arrival, his crystalline form now pulsing with a warm, steady light that spoke of contentment. "Dr. Webb, Captain Chen," he greeted them, his communication washing over them like a warm breeze. "I hope you don't mind the interruption, but we've received some concerning news from the border worlds." Sarah's expression grew serious. "What kind of news?" 3 Council scout ships have been detected in nearby systems. They're maintaining distance, but they're clearly conducting surveillance on our colonies. Marcus frowned. "Any communication attempts?" "None directed at us," Zephyrim replied. "However, our long-range sensors have detected increased Council military activity along the borders of human space. We fear our presence here may be causing difficulties for your people." This was what Sarah had been dreading. When humanity had offered sanctuary to the Zarathi, they'd known there might be consequences. But the reality of facing down the entire Galactic Council was beginning to sink in. "Have there been any direct threats?" she asked. "Not yet. But our sources within the refugee networks report that the Council has been pressuring member species to formally condemn humanity's actions. They're calling it harboring reality criminals." The term made Marcus wince. In the months they'd worked with the Zarathi, the idea of treating their abilities as criminal seemed not just wrong, but actively insane. These beings had turned a marginal world into a paradise. Their children played games that created pocket dimensions filled with impossible beauty. Their artists crafted sculptures that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. "What are our options?" Sarah asked. "We could relocate," Zephyrim said quietly. "Find some world in unclaimed space, far from both human territory and Council influence." "Like hell," Sarah snapped. "We don't abandon our friends because some bureaucrats get their feelings hurt." "Captain," the elder said gently, "we would not see humanity suffer for their kindness. Perhaps—" "Stop right there," Marcus interrupted. "Zephyrim, in the 6 months you've been here, do you know what you've given us? Not just the agricultural advances or the medical breakthroughs. You've given us hope. Hope that the galaxy isn't just a collection of fearful petty species clinging to the status quo." The Zarathi's light flickered with emotion. "Dr. Webb, you honor us. But no, you need to hear this. My daughter was born with a genetic condition that would have left her paralyzed. One of your healers didn't just cure her, they rewrote her DNA to make her stronger and healthier than any human child has ever been. My colleague, Dr. Patel, was working on clean fusion for 20 years before your engineers showed him how to convince hydrogen atoms to fuse more enthusiastically. We've made more scientific progress in 6 months than in the previous century." Sarah nodded emphatically. "And it's not just the practical stuff. Do you know what our crime rates have been like since the settlements were established? Down by 70%. Apparently, living near beings who unconsciously make reality more beautiful and harmonious has psychological effects. Our people are happier, more peaceful, more creative. You're changing us," Marcus added. "Making us better. Not by force or manipulation, but just by being yourselves near us. How could we ever give that up?" Before Zephyrim could respond, Sarah's communication device chirped urgently. She activated the holographic display, revealing the serious face of Admiral Rodriguez, the head of human colonial defense. "Captain Chen, we have a situation. Council fleet approaching the outer markers of the New Haven system. 12 dreadnoughts and a full battle group. They're broadcasting demands to speak with the human authority responsible for harboring dimensional criminals." Sarah felt her blood run cold. A council battle group could reduce human space to radioactive debris without breaking a sweat. ETA? 6 hours. Understood. We're on our way. As the transmission ended, Zephram's form dimmed with distress. Captain, perhaps we should surrender ourselves. Your people have done enough. Not happening, Sarah said firmly. Marcus, get to the communications center. Start sending everything we've learned from the Zarathi to every human colony, every research station, every university. If the Council wants to suppress this knowledge, they'll have to hunt down every human in space. What are you thinking? Marcus asked. I'm thinking it's time to show the galaxy what humans do when someone threatens our friends. 4 hours later, something unprecedented happened at the edge of the New Haven system. As the Council battle group approached, they found themselves facing not just the handful of human defense ships they'd expected, but a massive fleet that seemed to appear from nowhere. Admiral Theiss of the Corvan hegemony, commanding the Council force, stared at his displays in confusion. Where did all those ships come from? Admiral, his tactical officer reported, we're reading over 300 human vessels, colony ships, cargo haulers, research vessels, even civilian transports. They're all armed, sir, but with primitive weapons that shouldn't pose a threat to our shields. 300 ships? Impossible. Human space doesn't have that kind of fleet capacity. Sir, we're receiving a transmission. It's from everywhere. Every human ship is broadcasting the same message. Theiss activated the communication system, and suddenly his bridge was filled with dozens of human faces, ship captains, colonial governors, scientists, even civilian families. This is Captain Chen of the Human Colonial Authority, Sarah's voice cut through the chorus. Admiral Theiss, I believe you wanted to speak with the human authority responsible for harboring the Zarathi. Well, here we are. All of us. Theiss's mandibles clicked in confusion. Captain, I came to speak with your government representative, not whatever this is. This is our government, Admiral. Humanity doesn't work the way Council species do. When the Council voted to exile the Zarathi, they made that decision for billions of people who had no voice in the matter. When we decided to offer sanctuary, every human colony, every research station, every individual ship captain had a vote. The result was unanimous. Impossible. No species coordinates on that scale. Most species don't, came another voice, this one from Dr. Webb. But we humans have this funny idea that when you see people in trouble, you help them. All of you help them. Not because some government tells you to, but because it's the right thing to do. A new voice joined the chorus. Admiral Rodriguez from the Human Defense Fleet. Admiral Theiss, every ship you see here volunteered to come. Farmers left their fields. Scientists abandoned their labs. Families packed up their children and came here, ready to fight a Council battle group with mining lasers and cargo ships. Do you know why? Enlighten me, Theiss said dryly. Because in 6 months the Zarathi have shown us what the galaxy could be if we stopped being afraid of change. They've healed our sick, cleaned our polluted worlds, and taught our children to dream bigger dreams. You want to take that away from us? You'll have to go through all of us. Theiss felt a chill run through his carapace. His ships could destroy the human fleet in minutes, but the political ramifications would be staggering. 12 Council species would be committing genocide against an entire civilization that was only trying to protect refugees. Captain Chen, he said carefully, surely you understand that the Zarathi represent a threat to galactic stability? The only threat they represent, came a new voice, this one from a young human colonial administrator, is to the idea that things have to stay the same forever. In 6 months, they've solved problems that Council science said were unsolvable. They've shown us that reality isn't as rigid as we thought, that the universe can be convinced to be more than it was. Which is precisely why they're dangerous, Theiss snapped. No species should have that power. Why not? came the chorus of human voices. Because you're afraid they might use it to help people. Because they might make the galaxy a better place without asking your permission first? Sarah's voice cut through again. Admiral, let me ask you something. In all the reports about the Zarathi, have you found a single instance of them harming anyone? A single case of them using their abilities for conquest or domination? That's not the point. That's exactly the point. You're not afraid of what they've done. You're afraid of what they might do. You're afraid that if people see beings who can reshape reality out of love instead of fear, they might start asking why the Council maintains order through force instead of inspiration. Thais was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was uncertain. Captain, I have orders. The Council demands the surrender of all Zarathi for relocation beyond the galactic rim. And we refuse, came the unified response from hundreds of human voices. They're under our protection now. Then you force me to take action. Do you, Admiral? Do you really want to be the being who ordered the destruction of an entire species just for offering help? Do you want to be remembered as the one who committed genocide because some politicians were afraid of change? For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Thys hesitated. His orders were clear, but the implications of following them were staggering. Destroying the human fleet would mean killing millions of beings whose only crime was protecting refugees. Captain, he said finally, I need to consult with the Council. We will maintain position while I seek clarification of my orders. We'll be here, Admiral. All of us. As the transmission ended, Thys stared at the tactical display showing hundreds of human ships arranged in protective formation around the Zarathi colonies. Each ship was a death sentence waiting to happen. Their weapons couldn't penetrate Council shields. Their armor couldn't withstand Council firepower. Yet there they sat, 300 ships full of beings ready to die for strangers they'd only known for 6 months. For the first time, Thys began to wonder if perhaps the humans understood something about civilization that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. The galaxy cast them out, but humanity offered refuge. Without hesitation, the Council emergency session had been going for 18 hours straight. In the grand chambers where representatives had once unanimously voted to exile the Zarathi, chaos now reigned. Species that had never spoken to each other were forming unlikely alliances, while ancient partnerships crumbled under the weight of moral questions no one had expected to face. Ambassador Kethara of the Vorthak Collective stood at the speaker's podium, her 4 arms trembling with exhaustion and frustration. The humans refuse all negotiations. They demand nothing less than full recognition of Zarathi rights to settle in human territory. Preposterous, thundered the Corvan representative. We cannot set a precedent that allows member species to harbor exiled criminals. Are they criminals, though? The voice belonged to Ambassador Ventar of the Delian Republic, a normally quiet species known for their philosophical approach to governance. Has anyone actually reviewed the evidence of Zarathi wrongdoing? The chamber fell silent. In their fear and haste to remove the reality shapers, the Council had never formally established what crimes the Zarathi had committed beyond existing with their abilities. The threat is self-evident, Kethara replied, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. Beings capable of altering fundamental reality cannot be permitted to... To what? Ventar interrupted. To heal dying worlds? To save species from extinction? To turn barren rocks into garden paradises? I've been reviewing the reports from human space, colleagues. In 6 months, the Zarathi have accomplished things we deemed impossible. An uncomfortable murmur ran through the assembly. The reports from human territory had indeed been disturbing, but not in the way the Council had expected. Instead of reality-warping armies or cosmic disasters, they showed a society transforming itself in remarkable ways. The humans claim their crime rates have dropped 70%, continued Ventar. Their agricultural yields have increased by 300%. They've solved energy problems that have plagued them for centuries. Most remarkably, they report that their people are simply happier. Propaganda, snorted the Serpentine delegate. Human deception to mask the true scope of the threat. Is it? Ventar activated a holographic display showing data streams from independent monitoring stations. These readings are from our own surveillance equipment. Energy signatures, gravitational anomalies, quantum field fluctuations, all consistent with reality manipulation on a massive scale. But look at the patterns. The data scrolled across the display, showing complex waveforms that pulsed in organic rhythms. Every manipulation event is preceded by biological indicators associated with contentment, joy, or creative inspiration in the Zarathi. They're not weapons testing or military applications, they're art projects, children playing, communities working together to make their world more beautiful. Council Speaker Thymon raised his massive bulk from the central dais. His telepathic voice carried the weight of millennia. Ambassador Ventar, regardless of intent, the capacity for reality manipulation represents an existential threat to galactic stability. Does it? Came a new voice from the gallery. Every representative turned to see a figure that should not have been there. A human in a simple diplomatic uniform, standing calmly, despite being surrounded by beings who could kill her with a thought. Security! Cathara shrieked. How did a human penetrate our defenses? The human smiled. I didn't. I was invited. She gestured to a section of the gallery where several dozen representatives sat, species that had remained silent during the debates until now. Ambassador Rethnol of the Sanctuary Coalition stood. His people were among the oldest in the galaxy, known for their dedication to preserving life in all its forms. Colleagues, I present Captain Sarah Chen of Humanity. We have granted her emergency speaking privileges under Charter Section 47, the right of affected parties to address the Council when facing species-level threats. This is highly irregular, Thymon rumbled, but he did not object. The charter was clear, even if it had never been invoked by such a young species. Sarah walked calmly to the speaking platform, seemingly unbothered by the hostile stares of hundreds of alien beings. Honored representatives, I won't waste your time with elaborate speeches. I'm here to make a simple proposal. The Council does not negotiate with terrorists, Cathara hissed. Good thing I'm not one then, Sarah replied cheerfully. I'm just a ship captain who's seen what the galaxy could be if we stopped being afraid of each other. She activated her own holographic display, showing images from the Zarathi colonies. The chamber fell silent as representatives saw crystal gardens where music had become visible, children playing in fields where flowers grew in impossible geometric patterns, and communities working together to literally reshape their world into something more beautiful. You exiled the Zarathi because you were afraid of what they might do, Sarah continued. But has anyone bothered to ask what they actually want to do? Their desires are irrelevant, the Corvan delegate snapped. The capacity for abuse exists. So does the capacity for wonder, Sarah shot back. Tell me, when was the last time any of your species accomplished something that made the universe more beautiful instead of just more controlled? The question hung in the air like an accusation. The Galactic Council had maintained peace for millennia, but it was a peace built on rigid hierarchies and fear of change. Honored Speaker, Sarah addressed Thymon directly, you've lived for thousands of years. You've seen empires rise and fall, species evolve and adapt. In all that time, have you ever encountered a people who used ultimate power purely to help others? Thymon's ancient mind stirred. In truth, he had not. Every powerful species in galactic history had eventually turned their abilities toward domination or self-preservation. The idea of beings who could reshape reality but chose only to heal and create was genuinely unprecedented. "Captain Chen," he said slowly, "what exactly are you proposing?" "A test. Give us 1 year. Let the Zarathi continue living in human space under our protection. Monitor us, study us. Send observers if you want. If, after 1 year, you can provide evidence that the Zarathi have used their abilities to harm anyone or threaten galactic stability, we'll discuss alternatives." "And if they don't?" Cathara demanded. "Then maybe it's time for the Council to admit that their fear was misplaced." The chamber erupted in argument. Some species supported the proposal, others condemned it as madness. But in the chaos, something remarkable happened. The species that had remained neutral throughout the Zarathi crisis began to speak. The gentle Myron, who communicated through musical tones, sang of their fascination with Zarathi art that existed in dimensions they could barely perceive. The crystalline shard dancers spoke of reality sculptures that had moved them to tears. Even the normally isolationist void swimmers admitted to being intrigued by beings who could convince space itself to be more welcoming to life. "I've heard enough," came a powerful voice from the upper galleries. Every representative turned to see Admiral Thys himself, still in his military uniform, having rushed from the New Haven system to address the Council. "Admiral," Thyman acknowledged, "report on the human fleet." "Still there," Thys replied grimly. 317 ships, filled with civilians ready to die for beings they've known for 6 months. I've been monitoring their communications for the past day, hoping to find evidence of coercion or government manipulation. And? There isn't any. These aren't soldiers following orders or civilians being manipulated by propaganda. They're people who've seen what the Zarathi can offer and decided it's worth protecting. Thys paused, seeming to gather himself before continuing. "Honored representatives, I've commanded fleets for over a century. I've fought pirates, suppressed rebellions, and maintained peace through superior firepower. But I've never encountered anything like this." "Explain," Thyman commanded. "They're not there because they have to be. They're there because they want to be. Human parents brought their children to face down a council battle group. Scientists abandoned decades of research to protect beings who've given them hope for a better galaxy. These aren't the actions of a species being led by fear or manipulation." Thys activated his own display, showing tactical readings from the human fleet. "Look at their formation patterns. They're not military formations, they're protective ones. Parents shielding children, teachers protecting students. Every ship positioned to absorb fire meant for the Zarathi colonies." "Your point, Admiral?" Cathara asked impatiently. "My point is that I was sent to retrieve dangerous criminals, and instead I found refugees under the protection of beings who've decided that kindness is more important than survival. When was the last time any of our species did that?" The chamber fell silent again. In the entire recorded history of galactic civilization, self-sacrifice for strangers was virtually unknown. Species protected their own, but rarely extended that protection to others without extensive political or economic incentives. Ambassador Rethanol stood again. "I call for a formal vote on Captain Chen's proposal. 1 year of observation and monitoring, with full review of Zarathi activities." "Seconded," came voices from across the chamber, more than Sarah had expected. Speaker Thyman considered for a long moment. "The proposal is highly irregular, but these are irregular circumstances. All in favor of a 1-year moratorium on Zarathi exile, pending observation and review?" The vote wasn't unanimous. Too many species remained fearful of change for that. But it was decisive. 173 species voted in favor, 94 against, with 50 abstaining. "The motion carries," Thyman announced. "The Zarathi will be permitted to remain in human space for 1 standard year, under Council observation. Any evidence of reality manipulation being used for harmful purposes will result in immediate exile to the empty quarter." Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Thank you, honored speaker. You won't regret this. I hope not, Captain. For all our sakes. 1 year later, the Council reconvened to hear the final report on the Zarathi observation period. The chamber was more crowded than usual. Representatives had brought scientific advisors, cultural observers, and even artistic consultants. The findings were unprecedented. Not only had the Zarathi caused no harm, they had revolutionized human society in ways that defied traditional understanding. Crime had virtually disappeared in systems with Zarathi populations. Scientific advancement had accelerated exponentially. Most remarkably, humans living near Zarathi communities showed measurable improvements in mental health, creativity, and social cooperation. But the real shock came from unexpected sources. 3 species that had voted for exile, the Mirren, the Shard Dancers, and the Void Swimmers, had quietly established diplomatic relations with humanity, seeking to learn from the human-Zarathi collaboration. The evidence is clear, reported Dr. Calthon, the Council's chief scientific observer. The Zarathi represent not a threat to galactic civilization, but an opportunity for its advancement. Their reality-shaping abilities, when used in cooperation with other species, produce benefits that exceed our most optimistic projections. Even Ambassador Kethara, the Zarathi's most vocal opponent, seemed subdued. The data is compelling. But the precedent concerns me. If we reverse our exile order, what message does that send about Council authority? That we're capable of learning, came a familiar voice. Sarah Chen, now serving as the official human representative to the Council, stood at the speaking platform. That we're wise enough to change course when presented with new evidence. And what of the long-term implications? Asked another representative. If the Zarathi continue to influence human development, where does it end? Sarah smiled. We don't know. And that's the beautiful part. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy has a chance to become something genuinely new, not through conquest or domination, but through cooperation and mutual growth. The final vote was closer than the first had been. 141 species voted to officially recognize the Zarathi as a protected species under human jurisdiction. 97 voted against. 79 abstained, waiting to see which way the political winds would blow. As the session ended and representatives filed out of the chamber, Speaker Timon approached Sarah privately. "Captain," he said, his ancient voice carrying notes of something that might have been hope. "You have accomplished something remarkable. You've convinced the galaxy to choose growth over fear." "Not just me," Sarah replied. "Every human who volunteered to protect the Zarathi, every species that voted for the moratorium. Even the ones who opposed us, their questions forced us to prove our case thoroughly. And what comes next?" Sarah looked out through the chamber's great windows at the swirling cosmos beyond. "Now we find out what wonders the galaxy can create when people stop being afraid of each other." 5 years later, the Zarathi colonies had become pilgrimage sites for species across the galaxy. Not for religious reasons, but for inspiration. Beings came from thousands of light years away to see worlds where reality had been convinced to be more beautiful, more nurturing, more alive. The changes weren't limited to human space. Species that had observed the human-Zarathi collaboration began experimenting with their own forms of cooperation, breaking down barriers that had existed for millennia. The rigid hierarchy of the Galactic Council gave way to something more flexible, more creative. Elder Zephyrim stood in the Crystal Garden at the heart of New Haven's capital, watching human and Zarathi children play together in fields where their laughter had convinced flowers to bloom in symphonic colors. The fear and despair of exile seemed like a distant memory now. "Regrets?" Captain Chen asked, joining him as she often did for their evening walks. "None," Zephyrim replied, his light pulsing with deep contentment. though I sometimes wonder what would have happened if your people had chosen differently. We couldn't have, Sarah said simply. It wouldn't have been human. As they walked through gardens where reality itself had learned to sing, neither of them noticed the small ship entering orbit overhead. It carried representatives from a dozen species that had once voted for Zarathi exile, all hoping to learn how fear could be transformed into wonder. The galaxy was changing, one act of kindness at a time.